Grateful you chose us, and even more grateful that you've stayed with us as we hit the big stories. Let's start with this. Locally made guns have provided jobs for many artisans in Ghana, but the fear of getting into the wrong hands or falling into the wrong hands and in the end being used for crime is also a great cause for worry. Well, this morning we have a conversation based on some statistics we know in terms of gun acquisition thus far. Now, the statistics point to the fact that over 74% of guns have been acquired in this year alone, and that is part of findings by scientists from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. In fact, these that I mentioned are locally made, guns that cannot be traced. Cast your mind to years back and you would find out that 1.1 million illegal small arms were in our country. There was a lot of talk about it. The Interior Ministry put forth a program incentivizing people to return these arms. That amounted to pretty much naught. Well, today we look at different angles to the conversation and the menace it poses, especially considering what I was talking about a short while ago. The menace of terrorist attacks across the sub-region and escapees from different countries, including the focus is Nigeria here. What does this mean for us? Well, joining us for the conversation, Dr. Paul Poku Sampene Osei. He is a consultant histoforensic pathologist at the Komfanoche Teaching Hospital. He also is a senior lecturer with the pathology department of that university. We also have joining the conversation Johnson Asante, Programs Manager of the Small Arms Commission. And as well, how fitting to have a conversation on this with Professor Kwesi Inning, Director, Academic Affairs at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Gentlemen, for those of you who are with us as of now, a very good morning to you. All right, so we'll try and get our guests on that beat. But as you can see in your short, that proliferation of arms and 75% of guns used for committing crime in Ghana are locally made, according to a latest report from the National Commission on Small Arms and Light Weapons. Let me bring in Mr. Johnson Asante, Programs Manager with the Small Arms Commission. You know, over time, over the decades, we've had serious problems with, dealing with armaments, dealing with small arms and all of that. But it appears it is becoming a great worry now. Paint a picture for us. Just how worrisome has the situation become?
Hello.
I can hear you, sir.
Right. Good morning to your viewers.
Great. I would just be grateful if you could speak up a little.
Is it better?
Better. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So thank you for having me. And to respond to your question directly, yes, it is worrisome to the extent that we have been coming from various angles and various dimensions, both locally and internationally. Dealing with it is a matter that is of great concern. Not only the weapon itself, and as you rightly put it, armament, which has to do with the ammunition that accompanies it. That is the major issue that we contend with along this side.
Mr. Asante, I think you may have to reposition yourself. We're really struggling to hear you now. I would suggest that maybe you reposition yourself so we can get clearer feedback from you. It is crucial, this matter we're discussing, but we can't get what you're saying. So,
is it better now?
Way better. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Right.
All right. So
okay.
I would urge that you start from the top.
Right. So I'll just responding directly to your question, which is how worrisome is the situation. And I said it is very worrisome to the extent that we are dealing with it from various dimensions, which is the import and illegal entries and illegal acquisitions. And then also we are dealing with it from our own very local artisanal manufacturers
which we popularly will call the blacksmith. But lately, that is not just the end. It goes beyond the usual small arms and light weapons that we are accustomed with. We are now dealing with other issues of improvised explosive devices and other parts and components that people can also use, to make these things, which have been used in other jurisdictions to cause terror and disturbances. And so to that extent, it is worrisome.
And you talk about explosive devices. Of course, we would all be highly concerned there because of what is happening in our sub-region. But how many of these are we seeing in the system? I mean, I want to know the level of proliferation.
Well, in terms of numbers, we are always very careful putting numbers to it. To the extent that just one of it, when it gets into the hand of the criminal, is as dangerous and make it very difficult for you to put a figure on it. If you look at the recent incidents across the globe, particularly in the United States and other places, you will notice that some of these perpetrators carry just one weapon. And then once it is a high-capacity weapon and is able to enter into a crowd, it's able to cause a lot of damage and destruction. So the numbers, yes, are important, but the level of destruction and damage it can cause, it just takes one lunatic fringe to decide that he's going to cause that. Unless in a conflict situation where you are dealing with a lot of, weight in that conflict situation, then you are interested in numbers. Now, our last baseline survey put us around 2.3 million, which is something that we've spoken about over and over. Out of that figure, we looked at it, and almost 50% of that, 1.1, are weapons that are in illegal hands. So that is it. There hasn't been a baseline survey since 2016, but this is the extent to which we are dealing with. And if you look at population increase and the situation around us, some of the issues fueling acquisition and illegal acquisition has to do with lifestyle these days. And people, because of lifestyle improvement, and others also are acquiring it as a status symbol, then it means that we probably are looking at figures way higher than what we put out in 2016.
So lifestyle issues and people, acquiring arms as a status symbol, others for security reasons. I'm going back to 2020 when we had, that piece of information from the Small Arms Commission in terms of the fact that between January and June that year, Ghana had seen a spike in terms of the increase in acquisition of guns, up to about 75%. It doesn't appear the trajectory has changed. But what is the real meaning of this? Because these arms, as we know it, are being acquired on a larger scale illegally, which then means that there is no trace. And if they are used for crime, there's no way of tracing them.
Yes, and that is where the worry is, and which is why we take the opportunity to educate people that the laws in Ghana allow you to acquire the weapon. And so if you wish to, for any reason, there are processes and procedures that you need to go through to acquire things. And so do not, go through the illegal route of having it because it also has legal consequences when something happens or when you are arrested. And one could go to jail up to 10 years for illegal acquisition and use. So it's important that people get to know that there are procedures and processes that you can go through to legally acquire the weapon. And studies have also shown that mostly people who legally acquire the weapons hardly use it in committing crimes. Right. Especially in our part of the world. And so it is the illegal ones that people use in committing crime. So we urge people who want it to go through the necessary steps and procedures in acquiring it. And that makes it easier. And then when you have it, you are confident and comfortable that, I have legally acquired the weapon. Let me also say that the fact that you acquire it legally does not mean that, you can use it anyhow, because the acquisition comes with some conditions. Recently, we saw a disturbing issue of somebody carrying a weapon during a demonstration. And for us, it is completely unacceptable. And it's against the conditions under which one can acquire the weapon. So if you went forward to get the weapon, you'll be educated and you will be told the conditions, the procedures, the time and when you can use and you can carry the weapon. And so we'd like to use this opportunity to inform people about it so that, we don't fall foul of the law.
Before I bring in Dr. Sampene or say, let me just run by you this last bit, Mr. Asante. So you made mention of some key points. I just want you to briefly, expand on them. The first one has to do with education. Are we doing enough of it? You say that people must register their arms. A lot of us know that. But do some people, are they aware, the general citizenry, that if you purchase even a locally manufactured weapon, you must go ahead with certain processes to register these arms? That is one leg of the question that I have. And are we doing enough in terms of incentivizing the process? Because guess what? A lot of people have also told me in the past about processes of acquiring a gun, stringent processes. That also, in a way, appears to be putting people off the process. So they would rather be off the radar than get on the radar, because once they start the process, then it is known that they have a firearm. What is your quick thinking on these two angles?
Right. Thank you very much. So are we doing enough? Yes. And it is platforms like these and the opportunities like these that you give us that enable us to reach out to the general public on some of these issues, beside what we do on our own.
Right.
And that is why I take this opportunity, and I want to thank you also for the opportunity. As we have said, you need to go through the right processes. You need to go through the procedure. It's not a very difficult process. The law says you must be 18 years and above. You must be mentally sound, physically fit, for the weapon that you want to own. And then you must also have the safe and secure place that you will keep it, such that, unauthorized people will not have access to it. And then you must also be somebody without criminal record. And you must be somebody who has the means to acquire the weapon. And that is an interesting part, saying that you cannot say you are an unemployed person, but you still want the weapon. Usually, the police will take you through a process. And when you tick all these boxes, then you can acquire the weapon. So it is not a very difficult process, depending on the type. So I come to the second leg of your question, which is how laborious and difficult it is to get the weapon. It is when you want to acquire a sidearm, or what we usually will call a pistol, that is where it is slightly difficult, because that the law does not allow individual importers to bring it in here and sell. So if you want to acquire that one, you need to apply directly to the Minister of Interior for a permit. And that permit now allows you to import just that one weapon, that you want, and bring it in. And then when it comes in, you go to customs for clearance, you pay the right duties on it, and then take it to the police for the registration. So this is the process, and this is where usually it becomes a little siding, because it is only the Minister for the Interior who would give that kind of approval for you. And it is also done sparingly for some reason. So that is it. However, this is the position of the law, and if we want to look into it and see if, 1972 law has outlived its usefulness, and we need to do something about it, it's a general conversation we can ignite and have on these matters. I must admit that our gun laws, as I said earlier, are as recent as 1972. And therefore, if you want to use 1972 law in dealing with 2022 crime, you can imagine the gulf between, the two. So that is another matter and another issue that we need to tackle another day. But having said that, all in all, we all need to know that currently that is the position of the law, and there is, very little you can do about it if you want it, and if you want to be a law-abiding citizen.
Let me now bring in Dr. Sampene, who also joins the conversation on this matter. Doc, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining the conversation.
Good morning, my brother, and how are you?
I am doing well. I hope you are too.
I'm cool.
Right. So we have the benefit of this latest research piece put together by you together with others, and it also points to a known fact: 2.3 million firearms in the hands of different people in different parts of our country, only about 1.1 to 1.2 million of them registered. And then we also have the other issue of 90%, at least per your study, of violent deaths occurring outside the confines of conflict. That paints a certain picture. A lot of these arms are getting into unknown hands. And these unknown hands are using these munitions without the system even being able to trace them because they are not properly registered. What can you say on the back of this, and what else does this research piece evince on this matter?
Thank you very much, my brother, and thank you for the opportunity. Once again, this study was done retrospectively. I took the study from 2006 to 2008 to 2013, which was, of course, a 6-year retrospective study of gunshot fatalities in Ghana. And actually, before we started the program, or we started a study, we took into consideration the various highlights of gunshot fatalities, some of which we saw that most of these gunshot fatalities were from locally manufactured, or what we call country manufactured firearms or arms. In fact, they form about 90% of the cases that we actually survived. It was actually reviewed from the Ghana Police Service, where, in fact, from the ballistic unit of the Ghana Police Service. We reviewed that, and we realized that that is the case here. And so most of them, looking at the circumstances surrounding the gunshots and these fatalities, we realized that about 48.8%, which about 48.9% were actually from armed robbery. Almost 15 or 16% came from homicide, and then 10% from hunting, and then the rest, 8.9% accidental discharge, and that of social unrest. And then 7.7% were unsecured guns, that is the guns that were not secured in terms of disabling the gun when it's no more in use or by the owners. So naturally, that is what actually is happening in Ghana. And I think my brother, I was listening to him at the background, and I realized that actually he also confirmed or reiterate my point that the upsurge in firearm proliferation in Ghana is something that we need to be worried about.
Now, on the back of this study, what really does, these figures you're putting out, what then do they point to in respect of the proliferation of small arms, first of all, because we know about the challenges in terms of, reining them in. There have been programs in the past to get people to, register their arms. That has fallen on deaf ears, and it appears the proliferation is not stopping. What does this go to show further in terms of proliferation, in terms of use of such arms?
Like he rightly said, my brother who was actually speaking with you initially, like he rightly pointed out, in fact, if you are taking into consideration globally, with the exception of Brazil and then probably US, which has the highest in terms of numbers, in fact, annual number of deaths as far as gun arms are concerned, or firearms are concerned.
Right.
What is happening in Ghana? Ghana, we are almost second to Nigeria, where these type of deaths is also quite rampant. So it's becoming more and more dangerous in Ghana that firearms are easily finding their way into wrong arms. People who are, in fact, basically, it points to the fact that the unemployment situation in Ghana is luring a lot of people into getting money through the usage of these firearms, and that is where the danger is. And if you look at the ages that were involved, most of them were, in fact, the mean age was around 34 years.
Right.
And you can imagine how dangerous it is if this thing continues over a long period of time.
So then again, we have the issue to do with the ages, and I'm just trying to find that portion, because like you mentioned, The mean ages appear to be falling. Okay, so there you have it. Age distribution of gunshot injured victims. You would see that there are those aged between 11 and 12, all the way to upwards of 60, and the perpetrators as well, leaving a lot really to be desired. And you say, as per the results from the analysis, the mean and median age of the gunshot victims stood at 34 years, 156 days. These are people in the very, at the very height of youth and having their lives snuffed out in some instances. So that really is a big problem.
Sure. And you see, there's a new paper that I'm trying to put up. In fact, those who were involved in this type of armed robbery, for instance, and they themselves got shot by the police, maybe in the exchange of arms or whatever, exchange of fire. What actually we are trying to put up is that we want to look at their ages. And those that we can see, as far as their ages, they are also within the same useful bracket, within 18 to 25, maximum 30 years, 33 years, and they are holding these arms. And you can imagine that the way the unemployment system in Ghana, which of course is not an excuse anyway, but people feel that the best way to get money, as far as some of these things are concerned, is to probably pick arms and start, killing others, trying to snatch their properties and so on and so forth. And that has actually shot the armed robbery incidents to about 49%, if my calculation, in fact, is 48.9% actually. So you can imagine getting to 50% of these firearms find themselves in armed robbery, hands. So it's very dangerous. And these young guys are the ones who are actually involving themselves into it, as well as those who are getting shot are also within the youth bracket, and it's very dangerous.
I'll be coming back to you, Doc, on further details from this retrospective study, if you like. But let me also go to Johnson Asante of the Small Arms Commission. So when you say, this was 2 years ago when you were talking about the fact that many more people were acquiring arms on the back of, threats of insecurity or feelings of insecurity. Has that escalated now, especially considering what is happening in the sub-region?
Well, thank you very much. And let me say good morning to Dr. Sampene and the team for the work that they have done. Getting data in Africa, in our part of the world, is usually very difficult. And so to analyze this data, they've done extremely well. And thank you for coming.
So when you speak of analyzing data, are you referring to the data emanating from Dr. Sampene Osei and his team, or data linked to the question I posed?
No, data which Dr. Sampene and his team have analyzed,
right.
which I will come to later.
Right.
So to respond to your question, as I said earlier, it doesn't look like we are having a downward trend looking at what is happening around us, in the sub-region, particularly in the Sahel. It makes it even more imperative for us to redouble our efforts in dealing with the issues of illegal, flow of arms, from the Sahel in particular into our parts of the world. Recent concern, even from the World Bank, is another agencies, is that the Gulf of Guinea state seems to be a target, from the Sahel, because they feel that moving down to the Gulf of Guinea state will grant them access to badly needed resources to enable them ply their trade. And so at the back of this knowledge, you cannot say that, you need to relax. We are confident we can deal with it, but we cannot say that it is going down.
You're confident you can deal with it based on what?
Well, based on the information we have, based on the collaboration that we have with the security agencies, based on the activities and programs and projects that we are putting in place, are all helping deal with it. Fortunately for us, in Ghana, we don't deal with it as a standalone issue. It is dealt with by various agencies playing their role, in this matter. So To that extent, we are very confident we can deal with it.
We're seeing more and more information over the years of attempts to, rope in arms that ought not to be out there, registered illegally. We've seen incidents in Second D by your commission and in other places. What would you say that has yielded, especially in a turbulent year like this, where a lot has been happening in the sub-region, where we've had a lot of terrorist activity, we've had a lot of different happenings. How successful would you say that drive has been as far as Ghana is concerned?
Yes. So we have been.
Has there been any move this year, for example, in 2022? Has there been any move by the Small Arms Commission on that tangent?
Oh, yes. So that is why I said initially I'll come back to Dr. Sampene's and his team's research findings. And also because they dealt with historical data, which speaks to issues that has to do with data, extending 10 years back. Some of their results findings doesn't seem to dovetail into what we are doing well because of the nature of the data they have dealt with. Now, I'm responding to your question because of the things we are seeing and what we are doing. Are we doing? What are we seeing? We are seeing more foreign weapons and foreign inflows. We are seeing illegal acquisition, and these acquisitions are not, locally made weapons that people are acquiring, over the last few years. People have developed a penchant for foreign-made ones and foreign-made weapons. And so to deal with it, what we have done now is to put up, some posts at the borders, specifically Lubu, Paga, and also in Tema. As we speak, some of my colleagues and my executive secretary are in Lubu to look at what has been put there and what measures, we can deploy in dealing with the cross-border flows of illegal weapons. From there, they will be coming to Paga also, which, the project is almost complete. And then we will start the project in Tema. And then in the coming years, the next phase, we look at some other places like Sampa or Sekwejokrom, and also places like Akanu and those areas. So we are dealing with it based on the information we have and based on current information. We see more illegal inflows from countries around us and also from Europe and America. Now, you would notice that recently, I think last year or so, Customs intercepted some 343 pistols at the Kojoka at the Tema port. Now, why would anybody bring in over 300, sidearms? These are weapons that, here we call them gas pistols. And because they are non-lethal, and Europe and other places where they come from, they are not controlled. So if you are acquiring it, nobody really cares. But once they get into our jurisdiction, our blacksmith has the capacity, to modify these weapons to now begin to fire live ammunition instead of the blank ones that they are normally made to fire, or the gas, pistols that they are to make just a sound. So these are new information and new phenomenon that we seem to be dealing with, either than just the locally manufactured, ones that.
Okay. Let me sneak in this bit before I bring in security analyst Adib Sani. Adib, thank you for joining the conversation. Just hold for me. Let me stay with you, Mr. Asante, just briefly. So we know of what is happening across the world, what it means, the proliferation of arms, at least in other jurisdictions legally, like in the US. We see what is happening there, even in a system where all of these arms, by and large, are registered. But first of all, do we have limits in terms of how many arms people can own in Ghana? Like we know in South Africa, there's a cap of 5. And secondly, I'd like to find out, does the Small Arms Commission have a database where you can track registered armaments in the system?
Thank you very much. As I mentioned earlier, we are fighting proliferation in 2022 with 1972 laws. The laws we have
So the law in itself is not fit for purpose?
No. Yes. So, and that is where the major of the problem really also comes from. We do not, I'm afraid, have the limit to the number of weapons an individual can acquire based on the current law. And that is, another area of concern. So as it stands now, an individual probably can build an armory and he would not have infringed on the law.
So an individual could own a bazooka, own all kinds of armaments, and that would still be legal?
Not all kinds, because the good thing, however, in that law is that you are not allowed to own any automatic weapons or any military-grade, weapon. We have what we call the civil category weapons, from pump action to the sidearms down to the single barrel and double barrel hunting guns. But for automatic and semi-automatic weapons, the law frowns on that. However, it does not put a limit to the number that the individual, can acquire and possess, which means that you can register a weapon at the Nima police station, go to the ministry police station and register, go to Bunkrugu and register, go to Kintampo and register, come to Techiman and register. And by that, the individual can safely build an armory and he wouldn't have infringed on the law, and which is why it's important that the law is re-examined. In terms of database, the original data of acquisition is kept by the Ghana Police Service, and that is where the registration is done. And Ghana Police keep the data when it comes to weapon acquisition. However, if we want access to it, it is not a difficult thing to do because they know this is our way. Now, historically, you will realize that the Ghana Police Service used to register vehicles. They used to, regulate alcohol and tobacco in this country until some organizations were set up and those functions hived off from the police. As we speak now, the weapon registration system is still based with the Ghana Police Service. And that is what it is until the processes are done, and then it is also hived off. But as it says, it still stay with the police, and they keep the data.
Let me bring in Adib Sani into the conversation, Executive Council member, Coalition of NGOs Against Arms Proliferation. Now, Adib, you already are aware of this situation. Over 2 million firearms in the country, and over 1 million of them in the hands of people who haven't registered these arms. Now, there are different sides to the conversation. Some will tell you that, look, it is a source of revenue, especially for the teeming unemployed youth. It's interesting because if you look at just this morning in terms of our Living Standard series and all of that, some of the data coming to us shows that youth unemployment between 2017 and, say, 2020 has sort of doubled from over 9%, and we're looking at over 17%. These are the figures, and now it is getting even worse. You cast your mind back to the fighting between the people of Alavanyo and Nkonya, and you would find out that there's a lot of production and proliferation of arms in that environment. That has largely been contained, but from the economic aspect, people there will tell you that we use this to make a living. On the other hand, we are not getting a lot of these arms registered, and it's becoming a big issue. What is your initial take on this matter as far as the economic angle is concerned, and then the security angle as well?
Well, first of all, a very good morning to yourself, to Mr. Johnson, who I work very close with. I'm part of the team that is working with the Small Arms Commission to put together a new legislative regime to better control arms in the country. And work is in progress, and a lot of successes have been chalked already. And I'm hoping that going forward, we will have the political goodwill to be able to advance it to better improve the security of the state. And to the figures, as a matter of fact, the over 2 billion figure you mentioned is according to the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center 2014 baseline survey. So you can imagine about 8 years down the line, how many more of these weapons we could have in the system. And you also talked about the fact that about 1.25 million are registered. But the question is, how many of these 1.25 million renew their licenses? As at the end of 2020, according to the Small Arms Commission, only about 45,000 of the 1.25 million gun owners who have duly registered it renewed their licenses. So in the midst of all of these registered guns, we still have quite a considerable number of them who have not renewed their licenses. And talking about the economic bit of it, we have the artisanal gun manufacturers. Like you mentioned, Alavanyo Nkonya, as a matter of fact, at one point, I spoke with a contact of mine there who told me that she can actually go into the kitchen and instead of cooking rice, she would cook me a gun. And that it is knowledge that has been transferred from their grandfathers to them, okay? And they manufacture this as a means of survival. And I think this is where the problem is, because for years on end, governments have pretended that we don't have a fledgling local gun manufacturing industry in the country. As a matter of fact, beyond Alavanyo Nkonya, Kumasi, Boku, Tamale, and so many other parts of the country, we have these people who are able to manufacture these weapons. And it's not such a complex mechanism. It's about you getting the hammer right to be able to go hit the primer of the bullet, and you are able to have a gun in your hand, okay? And it's quite common. So if we fail to deal with the fundamental issues and only engage ourselves in surgical operations, we've heard that there are some individuals manufacturing these weapons, let's go and arrest them. Let's go and without dealing with the fundamental issues, the economic issues, then we might just, be on a wild goose chase, merry-go-round. And that is really disturbing because according to the Ministry of Interior, about 90% of guns retrieved at crime scenes are locally manufactured. So that should tell us the seriousness of the issue. And then when it comes to the registration process, at the point I was at the CID headquarters. And,
before we get into the registration process, pardon my coming in, we're talking about the economic angle. I just want us to stay there briefly because you say that we're almost pretending as though this didn't exist, but it is in existence, like you've mentioned, in parts of the Ashanti region, Kumasi. You can talk about Boku, which is, on fire today, and the fire has been doused tomorrow and back on fire again the next day. We also have Alavanyo and Nkonya and everything that goes on there. But you look at other jurisdictions. In the United States, and I mean the West, basically, they have gun manufacturing, in fact, armament manufacturing entities. And interestingly, they are thriving. So is it our failure then to monetize, an industry that we could even get returns from as a country? So here's what I mean. You get those who are involved in this local or artisanal manufacture of weapons. You put them together, you hone their talents, but they're producing for the state. And the state can use these for its armory and even sell some of it. Is that too far-fetched?
The best regime is no arms at all. In the US, as at 2018, there were about 390 million weapons in the hands of civilians, more than the number of human beings living in the US. What did we witness in 2020? Over 45,000 Americans died as a result of gun-inflicted wounds. In Japan, which has one of the strongest, one of the tightest gun controls in the world, last year, only a single human being died as a result of gun violence. And a year before, only 4 people, and it was big news. How come 4 people died in the whole of Japan as a result of gun, inflicted wounds.
So you're basically saying
but where we have gotten to, Akakpo, where we have gotten to, we need to take it as it is. The reality is, it is fledgling, and we cannot continue pretending about it. We need to put them together. And I've always indicated this. It is time for us to regularize, so we'll be able to regulate the activities of these artisanal manufacturers. And like I indicated, we keep pretending about it. Even if you hold a locally manufactured gun, I'm not sure you will be able to register it, because it comes, it doesn't come with a certain mechanism like the foreign-made ones. For example,
registration, numbers and all of that. It doesn't usually come with those details.
Yeah, and also for some of them, apart from the numbering and all that, it doesn't come with that marking in the barrel. When you fire a projectile from a gun, they are able to perform what they call ballistic test, and you'll be able to identify using the shell casings which gun fired this. But with the locally made ones, they are not able to do that. As a result, it's a bit of a challenge for law enforcement to license these weapons. A friend of mine put side by side a locally manufactured pistol and a foreign-made one, and asked me to identify which one is local, which one is foreign. Believe it or not, I couldn't. So that should tell you the level of sophistication. So if you are able to bring them together, regularize and regulate, there would even be the police on our behalf, and keep an eye on any other group of individuals who might, be engaged in such illegalities.
But then we're making the same point, Adib Sani. So basically, the industry is thriving. It is in our faces, and if we pretend it's not there, it will only come back to bite us. So we must put them together, ensure that they are registered, and then what? And then what next?
And then we'll be able to regulate. We'll be able to get them to at least have serial numbers. We'll be able to get them to sell it to those that have been given permits by the Ministry of Interior. So we don't get them out in the streets, on the black market, sold to criminal elements. Also, most importantly, we don't get any other person, who decides to wake up in the morning and, is manufacturing guns. We make them become watchdogs on our behalf. And trust me, if we empower the Small Arms Commission, they will be able to do a great work going forward. I've come to the realization that it looks almost like they've been sidelined so far as gun acquisition processes is concerned, the registration, the keeping the register, etc. When you even look at the Arms and Ammunition Act 1972, in one of the sections, it says the IGP is supposed to have a central register of all weapons. So if we have that register, Akakpo, how come we are not able to follow up on those that have, reneged in renewing their licenses? So the Small Arms Commission really has a very important role to play in that regard. And I'm hoping that we wake up from our deep slumber to the reality, to the fact that it is fledgling and we need to do something about it.
Are you suggesting that the Ghana Police Service has also, been sleeping on its duties in terms of this regulatory role that it has? Because I was engaging Mr. Asante of the Small Arms Commission, and he also made mention of the fact that when I asked him about whether they had access to a database, he pointed to the fact that they don't necessarily need a database and that the Ghana Police Service has it. So as and when there is the need for any such information, they will go to the Ghana Police Service. So it then raises questions. If some of these things are happening and people are not renewing their licenses and all of that, how can that even happen? Do you have an idea, Adib, or should I just throw that to Mr. Asante?
No, I think under the scheme of things, he is right to say they might not necessarily need it. But they do need it, especially going forward. The Small Arms Commission would have to be capacitated enough to also be able to perform some regulatory functions. For example, only 45,000 licensed gun owners renewed their licenses out of the about 1.25 million as at the close of 2020. So if the police did its job right, considering the fact that they have the database, they have the pictures, their addresses, their phone numbers, their next of kin, and all that, why don't they follow up and find out why haven't you come to renew your license? Nothing of that nature is happening. So it's quite obvious that the police is not performing the way it should. That is why the Small Arms Commission would have to come in to complement that effort.
All right. We're talking about the Small Arms Commission. Of course, they also deal with light weapons and all of that. Let me bring in Mr. Asante. Are there any responses you have to what Mr. Adib Sani is saying? He disagrees slightly when it comes to the bit about having a central database. But now that Adib talks about engagements with you in working on the 1970s era legislation that we have, can you give a pointer to whether we're going to see caps now when it comes to at least what you are working on together with Adib and other teams when it comes to the number of arms people can have and serialization and all of that? Can you give us some detail on that?
Thank you very much, Akakpo. And Adib, good morning. Thank you for appearing and thank you for the advocacy. I don't know whether I implied in my rendition that we didn't need the data.
I didn't suggest that you had said you didn't need it. I don't know whether Adib suggested that as well. All I mentioned was that you said you didn't have a direct, I don't know, necessity
we don't
for
have
it
it
because
directly,
you had
but
it.
the police keep it and we can have access to it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes. But so let me put something also right that in terms of Adib mentioned regulator, and then you also alluded to the police as not regulating. In fact, the job of the police is not regulation. The duty of the police is enforcement. And so that is where the lacuna is. Now, what is best practice globally?
Mr. Asante, pardon me, I missed a little bit of what you said. So you mentioned that the Ghana Police Service is not the regulator. I get that. So
yes.
They merely keep a database. That is it, right?
Yes, they keep a database. But I'm saying that in the broader scheme of things, police service are not regulators. They are enforcers.
Right.
But so as it is now, they are performing some duty of a regulator, which is actually not supposed to be their duty. Right. Which is why I also cited the example.
Which entity is supposed to do the regulation? Interior Ministry, the Small Arms Commission?
No. As it is now, the Small Arms Commission, which is set up as a single purpose vehicle to deal with matters of small arms and light weapons, would have to be transformed into a regulator to be able to do that. And that is where the reform of the law is important. Now, I cited the example of the police registering vehicles, after independence, the post-independent era. But you see that we now have a DVLA, which is the regulator in that space. When you come to minerals, mines, you have the Minerals Commission, which is the regulator, and the ministry plays the policy role, and you have the police as an enforcer of all the laws. And so this is where we are with the small arms issue. A cell reside with the police, trying to play the regulatory role, which really, in the scheme of things, should not be the job of the police.
Let me ask you this pointed question. Is the police successfully carrying out this role? So they are acting. It is not their role, but they are trying to give a semblance of that role. How do you feel the Ghana Police Service has fared? And is there going to be any legislation moving forward on this specific angle so that we can have a regulator, known regulator, to stem the tide of these happenings per the discussions you're having on moving away from the current legislation we have?
Well, it is part of the challenge that we see, which has to do with the issue of renewal, for example. And so when it comes to the police, they are enforcers. So if you don't renew your license, we'll come at you, or when it's used in commission of crime, then you are arrested and the law will take its course. but the regulator will put in place measures to ensure that the people who register their weapons have come back to renew it, or we have ways of reminding and getting them to renew. So that is, but you cannot blame the police for this. They have done this. We burden them with a lot of duties and responsibilities that other agencies are supposed to be playing, which is why it's important that the law is reviewed and, a proper regulator put in place. It comes back to the question of manufacturing, and that is also another issue. Now, you are making a very beautiful suggestion of putting people together, getting them to manufacture, and who regulates. That is where the issue is. Now, if we do not put in the proper regulatory mechanism and framework, what we'll end up doing is that we'll be playing catch-up when we get a proper arms manufacturing industry set up. Forget even about the local manufacturing industry. If you look at the rate at which our economy is going within Africa and within the sub-region, where everybody wants to come to Ghana and invest, vis-a-vis our other countries, it won't be long where you have others coming to set up, manufacturing plants. And when they apply, I bet you they probably will get the permission and the license to do it. And we will not have a regulator in place. And then we will begin to play catch up. In recent times, I know a country that, discovered oil just like Ghana did. And then they allow the oil companies, the big ones, to start exploration before they put in the regulatory measures. And now the oil companies are dictating what they should do. If we do not take the time to put in place the regulatory framework and we allow the multinationals to come and set up to manufacture, they will dictate to us how we should regulate them. And that is where the challenge is going to come.
That could be another resource curse that we have to get past. But let me bring in Dr. Sampene Osei, who also undertook this study with his team. Doc, I know you have some responses to some of the points that have been made. Let's start off from there before we go back to your research piece.
Thank you once again, Mr. Akakpo. I think Mr. Asante Chum made a point by saying that the data analysis becomes a problem when it comes to arms, firearms for that matter. I have a little bit of worry in that regard because, one, if he had the opportunity probably to read some of the research people have done in terms of these firearms and its fatality, you would have realized that people do it bit and pieces in terms of the country, in terms of the regions. Ours was on the northern part of Ghana, which of course, we realized that it has not been, people have not done enough work in that regard. So we decided to go into that aspect of Ghana, which is the northern aspect of Ghana or the northern sector of Ghana, where we came out to the various data that we had in hand. So Mr. Atib Asani, is it Atib or Adib Sani?
Adib Sani.
Adib Sani also reiterated the fact that about 90% of these arms are locally manufactured. In fact, Mr. Asante, in a way, also accepted the fact that some of these arms, like he rightly said, probably might have been imported, but they are modified locally to be able to suit the purpose for which these people want to use the arms for. So it comes to the point that the data is somehow credible, and I want him to also accept it, and that probably use it. He told us that he doesn't need the data, the police keep those data. And so they actually, when they needed those data, they come for them and then use it. I believe that, in as much as we are all trying to live safe in Ghana, everything like these things must be taken serious and probably work with it and then make sure that we attain the peace that Mr. Adib said, that in fact the best regime is no arms at all, because arms, whether they are manufactured locally or, externally, when they get themselves into wrong hands, nobody is safe. And then there's another issue of renewal of license. I'm talking about that people have renewed their licenses and the arms are not used by themselves. They renew their arms probably and hand it over to some people to be used for them, or some people to be guarding their homes and all those things. So please, the renewal alone is not panacea. to some of these things. So we have to be very careful as far as this licensing is concerned. The regulations and then the monetizations and then what we call it, that of the enforcers and all those men, they are very important. We do, but my brothers and sisters, my brother Dr. Asante, and then Atip, we should be very careful with regard to the license. We need to be very serious as to how these arms and where and who are those people using the arms. Like I said, in our new research that we are doing, we are looking at the situation where young boys, 18 years, some 16 years, up to 30 years, holding these arms, and they actually, if you look at them, sometimes you ask them what, in fact, those who didn't die, and probably you ask them what actually they were using the arms for, you realize that some of them don't have any tangible reason to be. So please, we need to be careful in regard to the data that are actually being churned out from the various researchers, and then we make do, and then make sure that we use them and use them well.
I want us to wrap on the conversation, but it's also interesting per the results that your team comes up with, Dr. Osei. I'm just looking at the significant number of fatalities due to robbery, for example, 48.9%. So if we want to monetize this industry, that is another angle in there. We also see from robbery followed by homicides with 15.6%, among others. Whether this is a burden we would like to bear in terms of the arms proliferation, even legally, is a different matter altogether. But to sum up the conversation, gentlemen, I'm going to give you a minute and a half each. You have all spoken about some of the things we should do. Succinctly, what should we be looking at? In very simple terms, what should we be looking at? And I also want you to react to that recent jailbreak in Abuja, the 6th of July, the 8th of July. That is the statement, but the actual jailbreak happening on the 6th of July, a Wednesday, with so many prisoners, hundreds of them escaping, 64 jihadists also escaping. What does this mean for the conversation we're having? I'll start with you, Dr. Osei. Hello, Doc. Right.
What is happening is that these arms, the three of us seem to agree that it is very dangerous in the society where arms seem to find their way in wrong hands and they are used, for rank purposes. So I would think that the regulators, if national small arm and the Ammunition Commission is the one responsible, they have to be up and doing. In fact, from time to time, probably if it is possible, they need to also engage the stakeholders such as researchers, the police, the security agencies, and all those things, so that we'll be able to find a lasting solution as to where they are coming from and how they get into the system. Now they are so sophisticated that these days you realize, I don't know whether you saw it on the news or somewhere, where armed robbers, no, not armed robbers actually, people who were interested in importing arms into the country use empty petrol tankers, which are crossing to probably our borders to pick fuel, loaded their arms into these petrol tanks, probably upon tip-off it was seen. Otherwise, these things would have come into the system, and could imagine what they could have used it for. So naturally, I think that we need to review the law that regulates it. That is NCRD 9, which is 1972 enacted law that seeks to regulate arms in Ghana. We need to change it. We can't use 1972 situation,
right?
Which is 50 years to resolve a current case like 2020. So that is my point here. So please, let us get serious with it, and then we believe that things will do well for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Osei, for sharing your thoughts there. Let me come to Mr. Asante. Your quick thoughts, summary thoughts on the matters that I raised.
Hello.
Hi, Mr. Asante. Please go ahead.
Yes. Okay. So, Doc, I was not in any way trying to contradict your data or your study. I rather, complimented you for the study. What I said is that because it's historical data, That used to be the case, between 2008 and 2013, as you perfectly put it, and that is absolutely right. What pertains today in 2022 is that we have more foreign-made weapons being used in the commission of crime. And that can be no fault of yours because your data only ends in 2013. And that is something we have also put up in the past between 2008 and 2013, that more locally manufactured weapons were used in the commission of crime. So you are right, and I'm not contradicting that. What I'm rather saying is that in 2022, the situation seems to have changed. And that is why we put in measures to deal with it, looking at the 2022 issues, which is that more foreign-made weapons are coming in and are being used in the commission of crime. So there is no contradiction, and I have no in any way, attempted to downplay your data. If anything at all, I rather appreciate what you have done. And for us, it helps our work. And so kudos to you and your team. The final point, what do? We need a proper regulatory regime, and we need to review the laws that we use in dealing with these matters. We need to let people know that acquiring a weapon comes with a bigger responsibility. And so if you acquire a weapon, you have a responsibility to make sure that it is kept safely, and then you abide by the conditions that go with the acquisition of weapons. We also want to sound a warning that anyone intending to bring in weapons illegally would have us and the security agencies to contend with. And so there is no giving up on this matter, and that, every effort is being made to deal with people who think that, they can proliferate and cause instability in the country.
Thank you, Mr. Asante. Let me take the final words of Adib Sani, and it's a wrap. Adib, over to you.
Okay. All right. So I know Mr. Johnson and his team are working assiduously, but it's difficult. And things are really hard for them under the scheme of things. It's tantamount to going to a gunfight with a knife, even though they are giving of their best. But no serious country would make a small arms commission an advisory body instead of a regulator. So it is very challenging for them. That is why it's important that we make the Small Arms Commission a regulator. What in essence it also means is we don't have an arms regulator in Ghana. And that is scandalous. I mean, to say the least. We need to make the Small Arms Commission a regulator instead of an advisory body, because things are changing, times are changing. These days, people are able to print guns in their rooms. Just print the outer body, print the hammer, print the trigger, go to the market, get a spring, get the hammer to hit the primer, and you have a gun. Now you are able to change, a semi-automatic Glock 19 into a full automatic gun. How do we deal with this? Is it illegal to bring in tasers? We don't have any regulatory framework on that. That is why we need to make the Small Arms Commission a regulator. And talking about Nigerian jailbreak, it is not the first time, and I know it will not be the last time. So our security apparatus should be ready and willing to put in place strategies so we are able to deal with somebody else's inefficiencies. Ghana is their favorite destination. Probably we are English speaking, we are prosperous, we have a large Nigerian community in Ghana. So we need to go beyond just issuing of statements on social media or electronically and go out there to the border towns, where these people come and are looking for accommodation, and landlords don't care where they are coming from. No questions are asked. All they want is the money. We need to sensitize. And they wouldn't be able to do it alone. There's a need for state CSO collaboration. So together, we can get as many Ghanaians as possible educated on what to do.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts on this all-important conversation. You just heard Adib Sani, Executive Council member, Coalition of NGOs Against Arms Proliferation. We also heard from Dr. Paul Poku Sampene Osei, who led that team with that research piece. He is a forensic pathologist, histoforensic pathologist at the Komfo Anokye Teaching Hospital, senior lecturer as well with the pathology department at the KNUST. We also had a crucial stakeholder, Johnson Asante, programs manager for the Small Arms Commission. All of them joined this conversation. Coming up next on the show, we're exploring the MPP's National Delegates Conference, which comes up on Saturday. We'll be looking at the campaign processes so far, the conduct of aspirants, and what we can share with you as far as the 50 candidates that are vying for different slots across the platforms or the different positions available. We'll be bringing you the scoop on that. But also this one that is of interest. Don't you go away. Don't you forget that we have that as well. The issue of some of our students, over 200 of them stranded in Morocco in terms of not getting their stipends. All of that still to come on the AM show. More reason for you to stay. We'll be right back.